Okay, continuing on the theme of why I have subpoenaed various people. So if you haven't seen the first one, this video may not make much sense. But again, I'm doing it in terms of the sports rod. Now, two more people have asked, or three more people. I won't say anything about it. Try and be as professional as I possibly can. Someone called Mr. Adrian D'Amico. Now, Adrian D'Amico, for those of you who don't know, he's a lawyer, senior lawyer. Used to work for one of the big firms in Canberra, possibly Phillips Fox, if not someone equally as big. And he got the job as chief counsel, I think it is anyway. The top legal specialist. Not the head of the whole defence legal organisation, but the person who's meant to know the most about the law. Now, because he was like the second head, at a particular point, Adrian, I don't know if you remember, you were the acting head of defence legal. This was during the Jedi Council affair, let's just call it, where I believe the law was broken by defence on a number of occasions in bad faith, and that they prejudiced the trials of people who whatever they've done, under our system of law in Australia, you're entitled to a fair trial, and it is not for the prosecutor or people on behalf of the prosecutor to hold a national press conference and say what happened before you've had a trial. And that's become the narrative, which was impossible to dislodge. So much so that Defence Force, again in highly bad faith, pursued some of these people when they left Defence and tried to start new lives overseas. The Defence Department pursued them, and in one case painted someone as a dangerous sexual predator, which was very far from the truth. He'd received an obscene email. Now, the Defence Department, I believed, act in bad faith. Now, Adrian D'Amico, as acting head of Defence Legal, you were involved because there is a record that you met with General Morrison before he made his speech, which I believe was highly illegal because it prejudiced the trials and it misrepresented the facts. And it did so in order to make Morrison and effectively by implication, the minister look good. That you must have known that was a highly illegal or unethical thing to do, and yet you allowed it to happen. Now, you might say, well, I didn't know it was going to play out the way it played out. That's fine, but I want you to bring in what you did afterwards, because you should have made a complaint to Morrison or to the minister or to somebody to say, he overstepped the mark. I told him not to do that. Here's the sort of email trail. Here is my contemporaneous notes to say, I told him you are not allowed to prejudice the trials on national TV. So, come in. That's why you've been called Mr. Adrian D'Amico. I think you're either going to have to fall on your sword and say it was either all David Morrison's fault, but then you're going to have to explain why you didn't make a complaint about it afterwards. And you could say, I didn't realise prejudicing the trials was illegal. That may have other consequences for you. You were the highest paid, or one of the, I don't know how much you're on, 500 grand a year or something, some big money to be a top shot lawyer. And yes, I do have some written documents which back up what I say. They're already on file. So if you want to come in and deny it, we'll have a discussion about that as well. Okay, Air Commodore Paul Cronin. Now, you're the head of the Uniform Legal Service. You were, by your own claim, the legal advisor to the Chief of the Defence Force during this sorry Jedi Council affair. And while I might seem to be a bit angry about this. If you knew what went on in the Jedi Council disaster, you would understand why I'm so angry. It was very substandard state of affairs for defence legal to get involved into. And at the top of the tree was someone called Paul Cronin, Air Force lawyer. And if you're not a lawyer, I'm going to give you a little bit of a test. This tells you why I've subpoenaed Paul Cronin. You don't even have to be a lawyer. I've gone to law school for 20 years and, got a degree from Oxford to know the answer to this question. Do you think as a lawyer can work for both the prosecution and the defence in a case? Is anyone in Australia going to get that wrong? Paul Cronin got that wrong. Yeah. And again, it's not any kind of defamation or any kind of speculation. That's on evidence by a third person who worked for Defence Legal, who wrote minutes of the meeting, just said, you went to the meeting where the Defence Council or the defence side discussed what was going to happen, and then you also ran the prosecution case. Now, you may say you weren't at the meeting and the records are wrong, blah, 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 maybe. Come in and say that. Looking forward to it. That will help my case anyway. If you come in and say the records were wrong, I was never at the meeting, of course I would never work for advise the defence as well as the prosecution in a particular case and to throw people out of the defence force, that's fine. But then I'll be able to say, well, it looked like you did, and so you can see why I became a whistleblower. So happy for you to deny it, because that would show that it's a bad thing. Finally, Captain Brian Parker, naval captain, the Royal Australian Navy, Brian with a Y, I believe. Now, although you probably know a lot about boats, you were the head of the military police. The military police, yes. Now, again, since my case involves so much to do with Afghanistan, illegal investigations, shaking down the special forces, the complaints I made about what was going on with the investigations, it seems disingenuous of you to say, oh, why would I be asked to come to the case? I made a complaint about the way your investigative service worked. You tried to charge me and put me in jail. So I think it's fair to say you're involved in my case. But you've asked your lawyers to find out why. So I'm going to have to tell you why. It's because I believe, as the head of the Defence Force Investigation Service, you acted corruptly. In fact, you only investigated people who the senior officers wanted you to. And while you probably didn't understand that was illegal, a little bit of thought will tell you that it is, because that means you're using the police force as a kind of shakedown arrangement where you only investigate your enemies. And investigate, that means put them on trial, because you always knew you were going to put people on trial, or at least harass them. So even being investigated was punishment alone. And the Defence Force hierarchy used it like mafia dons just to shake down the people they didn't like. So if I'm wrong on that, come in and tell me the times you didn't investigate people that you were asked to, and you said, no, I can't do that. There's no reasonable chance of a conviction, or there's no evidence, there's no reasonable suspicion of an offence. I'm not going to investigate that, because I think you won't have any of those examples, but bring them in. I think you were just a flunky that carried out investigations on behalf of the CDF. But if you can disprove that, that's great. So please bring that in and prove me wrong. I'll be happy to admit that I'm wrong. But you asked to find out why you were subpoenaed, so I'm just telling you. That's what I believe. It could be allegedly. Again, I want you to come in and tell me what you think is illegal. So if you think while that sounds like a trick question, I'm going to say, was it illegal because the general told you it was illegal, or was it illegal in your mind because it contravened an Australian law? Now, if the second definition is your definition, I'm going to go through a few cases for you and ask you what law was contravened. And also, I'm going to ask you why you didn't investigate anyone with a rank above you ever. Or if you did, tell me. And if you thought you could have investigated the generals. Finally, I'm going to ask you why you didn't follow up on the complaint that I sent you, and why you tried to charge me for having a legal opinion. How you thought a lawyer having a legal opinion different to the CDF's could actually be an offence, and what category of offence that might have fitted into. I'm glad you asked why you've been subpoenaed. I hope you're satisfied, and I'll see you on the 2nd of March.